with regards to the same. We've seen just during the recent protest on the 16th of July, the scores of police brutality, arbitrary arrests during the demonstrations, and the attempt to trump up charges of the various persons who have been arrested. We've also seen scores of goons destroying private property in various areas, which it seems the police have either no interest to arrest these goons, or it's a concerted effort to refuse and ensure that the protest people are not able to raise their voice. As a law society, we have condemned the destruction of private property, theft to individual citizens by these goons who are undermining the very heart and soul of why these protests are there, because this is about people raising their voice and wanting to be heard. And we continue to see more deaths um, with regards to these protests, unfortunately, irrespective of the fact that we've continued to raise concern. What is also worrying for us as the Law Society is the continuous abductions, which has led to a lot of citizens fearing to come forward and give evidence to support the cases that they have seen witnessed, the fear to even meet IPOA offices because of the fear that you may be picked up next, you may be identified next. And we have also seen a lot of games being played by the different police who are purportedly investigating some of these issues. And so, as a Law Society, we have been offering our legal assistance with regards to protesters who are freely engaging in exercising their rights, as well as those who want to meet the DCI officers with regards to giving their statements, or those going to IPOA to issue their statements, and we'll continue to offer that help. What we have noted with great concern as well is that there's some growing fear, and I ask us that reach out for psychosocial support. We have various partners that are offering support. We know that the scenes may have been quite traumatizing for a huge number, particularly those who have witnessed their friends dying beside them or in their arms. So we continue to offer support for the victims, and we continue to seek justice for the victims. We ask that there should be no state interference, particularly for the right to freedom of expression, and similarly against no attacks against media personalities that are reporting what is actually happening for the public good, because it's in our interest that we protect this constitution. It's an interest that the fourth estate continue to be a watchdog to ensure that the human rights are protected at all times, because without them there'll be the danger of the single story of the police officers, and no one will be there to help defend the protesters if there's no evidence to support what has been going on. Because the most unfortunate thing is dead men tell no tales. I've continued to get a lot of distress calls, and will continue to ask. So those who may not get the opportunity to speak as soon as you want, please ensure that you also post and write down. Today's session will be more for listening and collecting views. The Citizens Assembly is about the people's voice. We want to listen to you. We want to listen to your grievances. We want to listen to your challenges, and we see how can we bridge those gaps. We've also had the appointment of part of the cabinet. So we'll be listening and collecting your views, as well as giving advice where possible, and taking also into cognition any issues and see how we can escalate them further. And so I open the floor, and Mano will be my co-host for now as we continue with this discourse. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, for those opening remarks. It's important that we emphasize that this session is only for collection of your views and perhaps answering a few questions here and there, especially on what has been happening, and as the President has highlighted in the last week or so. We have a toll number for purposes of making reports on individuals who are still missing. The number is 0800 720 434. I can repeat that, and it's on the President's X account. Kindly, if you know of a missing person or a friend, a relative, a brother, sister who's still missing, pass that information to us in that number for purposes of actually following up and having habeas corpus applications before court for purpose of production of those individuals. We are aware that there are some individuals who are still missing. There are some individuals who are still being held against their will in police stations. We are aware that there are individuals who have been incarcerated beyond the constitutional period of 24 hours. And I think it's important that you give us that information. You give us the data for purposes of following up the processes, both to those officers and also in court. So I wish to open the floor. I can see PLO. Kindly, we can allow the members of the public to ask and present their views. We are here to listen. I'm hoping that once you have the microphone, you're able to summarize so that we can give as many people as possible the opportunity to raise their concerns. I think I'll straight proceed to allow Olago. Olago, can you hear me?
Yes,
you
I
have the
can hear.
microphone. Kindly proceed.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Okay, I just have an issue to address with the notice that was posted by the Office of the Inspector General, National Police Service. I'm not much into law, and I don't know much about law, and I just know about the Constitution a little bit. So the notice that was the press statement, it was to ban the ongoing demonstrations that have been taking place nationwide for almost 2 weeks. Now, as per the statement, they were saying that the Constitution somehow allows them to bar people from protesting, and that if you are supposed to hold a protest, you are supposed to put a notice to the chief or to the nearest police station, informing them of the protest, and the names of those who are organizing the protest should be presented to the police station, and the various stakeholders of the protest should be presented to the police station. Now, as per that notice, I think what the government is trying to do is trying to identify more people to abduct and more people to victimize, so that the protests the ongoing protests are not they don't have they are trying to get the leaders of the protest. So according to me, they have a point there by saying that the organizing of the protest the notice should be given to the police. And I just wanted to get the comments from you guys that understand the law. How do we go about that? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. We will take several so that the president is able to address them at once. Kindly, Arnold. Arnold, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Kindly proceed.
Okay, yesterday I attended an express meeting, and the citizens seem to be more from the government. Seemingly, there's going to be a total shutdown, I think, beginning from next week, according to what I heard yesterday. I just have my question is that how is this going to be on our advantage, us as Gen Zs, or what are going to be the consequences? What are the consequences going to be as per the Constitution? Being that it has been, I think, a whole month of protests, but seemingly the government seems to show us the middle finger. Okay, now that you're going to make it a complete shutdown, what's going to happen to us, and how is the LSK going to stand by us and protect our rights? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Kimuzi, you have the microphone. Kimuzi, if you can hear me. Leti Posh. Benji.
Good morning, everybody. I'm ready, and mine is a comment and a suggestion. It is very obvious that LSK is under the right leadership, and I would be remiss as a Kenyan citizen if I didn't just commend the wholehearted, almost over the board application of self to work by Her Excellency Faith Odhiambo, the president. We never expected this. We see her in the afternoon, we see her at 2 a.m. She's everywhere, and this is indeed very inspiring to the young people, not just for the Law Society, but also just for leadership in general. I think a lot of our young people have never really, since Wangari Maathai, had role models in leadership. So just to say that this work has not gone unnoticed. But then my suggestion is maybe just to pivot and suggest to the Law Society that a lot of the work has been reactive in the sense that you're firefighting left and right. You're trying to save Kenyans from kidnappings. You're trying to prevent murders. You're fighting police misconduct. I was going to suggest with this half cabinet that was named yesterday that obviously has many, many, many legal and constitutional issues that perhaps the LSK could now take a lead proactive role in trying to forestall the actual vetting and installation of these CSs, many who have integrity issues, who have legal problems, cases in court, lack of compliance with all manner of regulatory bodies, etc. And even just the whole question of, can a cabinet be dismissed, degazetted, and then if Duale comes back, what's to prevent Alfred Mutua from coming back? I mean, I think there are a lot of legal issues, and some of us are available as petitioners in court. We've done this for a while, and maybe what I'm suggesting is a greater focus on public interest litigation, even as all the other activities go on. So that's my suggestion, and let us stay vigilant and let's keep working. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benji, for those remarks. James, are you there? James, you have the microphone.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Mulamba. Well, I have noted with concern that we are in the home stretch of fighting against a rogue regime whose idea of government is something we've never seen before. Because I don't understand how a government would be so corrupt, so inept, so incompetent, so tribal, and everything we stand against. Perhaps Uhuru was bad, but not this bad. I have two questions. One is in regards to the cabinet secretaries. I think there's is it Article 6 that elaborates that if a state official or a government officer is removed or dismissed from office on grounds of inaccountability, lack of integrity, and such grounds cannot be reinstated or cannot occupy office. I mean, it has been the same challenge former governors who are impeached like Mike Sonko have been facing. So is it possible to push for a new CS list positions, a new list of CSs, by incapacitating the likes of Duale, the likes of Kindiki, because they were dismissed in the first place? The second question would be, outside parliament, which is the other mechanism to push for law in Kenya? For example, if we had a law that bars cabinet secretaries from office by virtue of their involvement in politics, that we have a law that disqualifies anyone as a cabinet secretary just because they have participated in politics or they have a political interest. The last question would be, we already know by now that Parliament is compromised. And if it wasn't, Parliament would have been the best tool to agitate these issues directly to the president. After all, they are our representatives to the national government. We understand the discussion that went on in the first few months of 2022 on who had an absolute majority in Parliament between Kenya Kwanza and the opposition, led by Azimio and other parties. How did that discussion go? How comes Kenya Kwanza claimed majority and we all know that the opposition had more MPs than the government? How did we allow the government to influence and infiltrate independent MPs and MPs from the opposition side to influence a majority? Can we find out if it's possible to push the government through court or whichever means, so that we can take back the majority absolution from the government back to opposition, because that is the only way we would successfully push for a removal of president, either on grounds of incapacity or on the grounds of violation of Kenyan law, having committed a crime under Kenyan or international law, or is gross misconduct, or the violation of the constitution. Allow me to yield the floor.
Thank you for that.
Manu, I think we answered those because they
Mhm.
are quite a bit.
Yes, kindly,
Uh,
if you can respond to those first, yeah.
I'll pick some and then you can pick some. Now, the
Okay.
first thing with us taking a proactive role, I say that LSK has been striving with regards to the protests, yes, because you cannot plan instances of abduction. Though we have been able to get progressive courts that are able to give us blanket orders in terms of access to the different police stations, so that irrespective of whichever police station, we don't have to come back and get another order. But I agree with you that with regards to the future of us taking certain proactive roles, particularly after appointment of cabinet, that is something that we're already thinking around and with like-minded partners on the various strategies that we can employ. And we are humbled because it's by working together with the different institutions that we're able to make a greater concerted effort, because the need is quite large, and it's all around the country that we must respond to the different challenges that are rising. Now, with regards to issuing a notice to the police, the problem is it's not the notice that gives you a license to protest. Protests can also be spontaneous. And so you're giving a notice for the purpose of them facilitating the protest. So it's not a directive that you have to give it this way. And I think what the acting IG is trying to seemingly tone down after the court orders. But the aim is to merely just facilitate and provide protection, but it's not that that is the license that you will be able to now protest if you give that such a notice, because we have had even instances where the Nairobi area commandant has regional commandant has refused for people to exercise their right to picket, even irrespective. And that is not his prerogative. It's a constitutional right. As long as we are peaceful and you're able to exercise your rights well, and that's why we need to continually be vigilant and raise concerns, particularly when they're goons. And we have seen situations, the ones who call themselves Nairobi business people or business city business people with rungos, trying to be infiltrate the protests, and those goons that come to take advantage and steal. We need to be vigilant so that those ought to be arrested, because they are not part of the peaceful protest. They're destroying private property and stealing from even the protesters who were just engaging in a peaceful protest. And so, as LSK will continue, we are looking at the various questions, both constitutional, and we're grappling on the best strategies on how to come forward. Now, with regards to the other methods that are available, of course, the Law Society has always gone to our courts to raise concerns, because as much as we table our concerns with regards to any pieces of legislation in uh, in Parliament, and we have seen how our Parliament has been the weakest link in this country, in this nation. I dare say I've said this several times, and I continue to say it. Our Parliament has failed us because they have forgotten that their role is representation and are carrying out other roles. The courts had declared CDF unconstitutional. It ought to be implemented. It ought to be one of the first things that the head of state implemented and stopped this issue that Treasury is continuing to disburse CDF, yet it's unconstitutional. We need to have the women reps, that NGA fund that is unregulated on how they use, how do they account for the monies that are given to them? How much do we actually see benefiting? That money should go into education or health. CDF should go to the governors to actually support development projects and should be purely for development projects at the county level, so that we can hold our governors accountable in the same manner and fashion we have held the head of state, demanded for accountability and transparency, so that we can actually feel the benefits, and MPs and women reps can focus on what took them there to represent us. One of the speakers has raised the concern that how did we allow independent candidates to switch, yet the opposition and independent candidates made up the majority. And again, to say is that we don't have proper leaders who recognize the importance of protecting their members. Once they get in, they sell themselves for the highest bidder, and we see members of parliament changing sides, and that's why we have an executive that is controlling the parliament, and that's why we can see decisions are made at the executive level and implemented to the letter at parliament level. And that's not the kind of democracy that will ensure growth, accountability, and transparency. Because today we would be comfortable to raise, if you had concerns about any cabinet nominees, is to go and table and challenge them through your representative in parliament, knowing full well that your representative is going to stand up for you. But the challenge that we have in this particular parliament is we have parliamentarians that do not listen, that do not want to hear the position of the people. And they will remember you 5 years when it's almost the close of the term. That is when they'll remember that they have an electorate, and they've forgotten the primary purpose in which they went to hold those particular positions, those particular seats. And therefore, with such a parliament, the question is, that's why now the head of state has to negotiate with the people of Kenya, because those who ideally should be representing your voices, should be standing up for you, should be able to share with the executive the kind of position the people of Kenya are holding, have failed to do so. And it's not that we let them, but it's individual choices. In as a nation, unless we demand for accountability and transparency, not just from our executive but as well from our parliament, because parliament has the ability to vet the budgets that are being used by the executive, have the ability to vet the borrowing powers, has the ability to vet these nominees, has the ability to say no. And the more we keep quiet and they watch and we don't hold them accountable, then we'll continue to see the games that we saw, that in 30 minutes we allowed the army to be deployed, and the army is still deployed indefinitely for this particular period, because even the orders that were given to the court, there's no particular period that is be noted until further period, until they feel that they have restored peace. So is peace when they have stifled the voice of the people, or when they're able to finally listen and sit together and work with the people? And so if we don't have a parliament that is able to vet, a parliament that is able to be held to hold people accountable, then we'll continue to struggle and strive. And it's high time that we also asked our parliamentarians for accountability so that we can actually have a government that is working. They can hold the executive accountable, and judiciary as well. We demand from them accountability, that they hold both these two arms of government accountable. Manuel, we can pick maybe the ones that I may not have responded to.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I think you have addressed some of the questions that were asked, and I think it's important to note that the Law Society issued a statement on the question of notice to police before you demonstrate, and of course the courts have already suspended that directive, and for those reasons, I believe that question has been addressed. The right to demonstrate does not require a person to seek permission to express themselves. It's a right under Article 37, which does not require any other person's permission, as long as it's the demonstration or assembly or picketing is peaceful and it's within the law. I don't think, and of course, as the courts have pronounced themselves previously, this is not the first time the IG or acting IG have attempted to take us back to the old constitution, where you would be required to seek permission to exercise a constitutional right. We will be waiting for the court, of course, to render its final determination on that question by the case under Katiba. On the questions of the cabinet, and I think, Madam President, you have addressed that question properly. We have two processes to actually vet these individuals through our representatives, who have definitely failed us as the members of the public. We expect them to take their work seriously. They have a duty to oversight, to legislate, and to represent. They have actually abdicated their roles, their seats in Parliament, because that is the most important seat that has representation of the members of the public. The views that the members of the public are addressing through this citizen assembly and through social media are issues that these members of Parliament, we gave powers to represent us in the National Assembly and the Senate, are supposed to actually represent us by ensuring that they vet these individuals, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has been implicated in court cases, that will not have a cabinet secretary who has ongoing court cases, who has been implicated in corruption matters. And the buck stops at them. If you look at the people who are appointed as cabinet secretaries, some of them had ongoing cases in court. Some of them have been subjected to, have been suspected to have actually pilfered public money. And so these people went through the same parliament, and all of them voted with acclamation. And I think it's important that we hold them responsible for the duty that we have given them. They have a choice either to represent the people who elected them, or to cede that power back to the people for purposes of ensuring that the people will pick a person who can represent their own interests. I'll keep opening up the space. I don't know whether Jatelo, you're there. If you can be able to make your contributions, you have the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President and everyone. I'd love to speak on two things. First is on the cabinet, and I'd ask LSK to give the constitution, what the constitution envisages of a cabinet. What does the constitution see? What's the cabinet that the constitution wants? I was taking some few notes as I was reading my constitution, and if you check Article 10, and you remember the other day, the former KRA chairman, Mwaura, the court said he's not fit to hold that office because of our national values. And this same Article 10 on national values talks about equality, equity, inclusiveness, and protection of the marginalized. So I think the cabinet we want is a cabinet that has a third women, a third gender rule is observed, a cabinet that has a person with disability, a cabinet that has young people, a cabinet that has marginalized and minority communities. And Article 100 requires Parliament to enact laws to promote representation of women, youth, persons with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized persons in governance. If you check 54.2, demands that 5% of elective and appointive positions be reserved for persons with disabilities. If you go to 55, it emphasizes the need for involvement of youth in every stage of governance, and I don't think cabinet is not included in that. Article 27.8 lays foundation to ensure that at least a third of women or men, their third gender, at every level of governance. Now, if you check the previous cabinet we've had post 2010, Uhuru never reached the third gender rule, which I think out of 21 should be at least 7 women or 7 men, because actually women can also be majority. If you check Ruto's cabinet, that was never achieved. So I think by disbanding his cabinet, he had a chance to get it right, but still maybe he's not getting it right. So I think if LSK could furnish him, could advise and tell him that this is the cabinet envisaged by the Constitution of Kenya. Yeah, because I don't think we can. And number 2, on recycling these former cabinet secretaries, do they need to go through vetting afresh? I need to know that. And as we talk about austerity measures and living within our means, what is the cost of vetting a cabinet secretary in terms of sitting allowances and all those things? Why then did he have to dismiss them, to sneak them back? Why did he just dismiss those he wanted to dismiss? That's my question. Then secondly, I'd speak about education. I'm doing some research on the cost of education in Kenya. If you check, for example, CDF is about, every constituency spends 30% of their CDF on bursaries. That's about 15 billion across the 290 constituencies. We have presidential bursary at around 800 million. We have governors nowadays having scholarships and such things, county bursaries. We have Ministry of Education bursaries. Then we have non-state actors also giving bursaries. And you find that we also have women rep, the NGAF, having some allocation for bursaries. And you find that these bursaries are given to people who are your friends or through political affiliations. For example, I don't think anybody will get presidential bursary without connection. CDF, it's the politicians dish it to their supporters. Yet in their manifesto, both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio said they would strive for a Kenya where there is free education. My proposal, therefore, which I invite everyone maybe to think through, is what if we take all these monies? Why do we need 15 billion to go to constituencies and go back to schools? Why don't we have a national education fund whereby all these funds can be put there? Then we ensure that we have a universal free education from primary, secondary to university level. Yesterday, you saw the bishops calling the president to change the university funding model. So my suggestion towards this is that all monies that are meant for education purposes be put in one fund so that there is accountability, little embezzlement, and there is no need to give me bursary. Just pay directly to the school so that I go to school and learn for free. So I think those are the 2 things I wanted to ask on the cabinet, and that on education. I'm very keen on education because I'm a product of free primary education. This Gen Z product of free primary education, and that's why we are able to ask questions that will make our country better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions and contribution. Be Real, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Manua. Good morning,
Morning.
President. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Kindly proceed.
Yeah, my question is just It's aligned with what Benji said. How can we file for a memoranda for these individuals that have questionable characters and they have pending cases and they have fraudulent cases still pending on with them? How can we file that? Because I think now we should watch for filing each and every individual at a personal level, and us as if you and your team as Republino can support that, because this is despicable what's happening, because we're just being it's feeding from left to right. We're not getting any solutions out of this. So how can you file for these people that were elected, actually selected? They were not elected, they were selected, so that we can remove them from those in now in the law legally.
Thank you so much, Biril. Ian, sorry, Arnold.
Thank you once more. I have a question. Mine goes for education, just like Jatelo said. We've seen it go through social media that around 153,000 students are not going to receive help. And we both know for sure that most of these students, they can't support themselves. They depend on government help. But now we see 153,000 students having their education crippled. What does LSK hold in accordance to this, and what do you advise these affected students to do? Because I've seen in more university groups, I think KU groups, and I think MKU, though MKU is a private university, but they are advocating that students go for protests in line with the amendments that are coming in, that they are going to cut the budget for help by around, I think it's around 4.2 billion shillings. So what is the stand of LSK on this matter? Thank you.
Thank you. We can take one more before I allow the president. D, are you there? You have the microphone.
Okay. Mine is a question to the legal minds that are here. I saw Nelson Harvey post something about that CSs, when they are fired, they can no longer go back or active position or appointed position. I want to know how true that a part of the constitution is, and what is the legal, like, let's take them to court or something like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam President, if you can take some of those, if you're there.
Okay. Now, let me start with the last one with regards to the 153 students. These are some of the changes that we are agitating for with regards to the education fund, or we are raising concern with. Help affects so many people with regards to access to education, but also there have been questions on the current free primary education that is there. So education as a whole raises very critical questions. We remember the start of the year, even after the floods, we raised that concern with the ministry and the head of state with regards to, there are several schools that had been flooded, people had lost their homes, people had moved, and yet the government was swiftly moving on to open. As long as schools within the cities could open, they had forgotten about the other schools, that children were going to be disenfranchised. While others move on, them they're struggling, they'll be left behind. And we raised that concern that it seemed that it fell upon deaf ears because nothing was since done. And that's why we're having this even strike, eminent strike, that a notice has been issued, because we even have the larger problem of the JSC that is still ongoing. And so these are concerns we have continued to raise as the Law Society of Kenya. And it's hard time that we also ask our representatives, even in Parliament, because they have the ability to affect the budgets. Because you can talk about something, but if it's not budgeted for, then it means there will be no indication. When you even look at the proposed cuts in the budget, And the Appropriation Act, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, we trace where is the money going? Where does the budget say what is going to be cut? Because yes, the executive can cut, but it can cut crucial areas for the citizens to feel the cut and them not to feel the cut. The cuts should be towards their recurrent expenditure, trips, any luxuries that are there, so that they actually budget for access to education, because the education question is large. It's not just about the health students, it's about free primary education. It's about access to books and facilities. It's about the access to school food that is given to some of the students in school. We have cases of people and children not being able to even have meals, and if it's not for the meal that is sometimes provided in schools, then there's nothing. There's not even access to even something that these young children are able to partake in. So the education problem is a larger problem that we need to deal with, even as we look at the current syllabus and curriculum. So it's not just us patching up with regards to help. Help is a smaller part of the larger education problem that we've been continuing to raise, that the government needs to have serious review and budget towards it, because it's not about promising and talking about it. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, so that we can actually see seriousness in improvement. Amanwa, maybe I didn't write notes. You could let me know the other areas that questions are, and then I can respond. But I see we
Yeah,
have
I think
Abna.
one of the questions
We
that,
have Abna here. We have
yeah,
Lavance here. They can also answer some of these questions with regards to the law, so that where I missed out, they
sure.
can fill in.
Sure. One of the concerns that was raised, I think, by Be Real was which process should the members of the public take when they want to submit memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries. I don't know if you can take that. Then we can, of course, allow the other advocates on the forum to answer the questions that have been put forth. Madam President, are you there?
Repeat, Manuel.
The process that the members of the public should use to pass memoranda on the particular cabinet secretaries before the vetting starts, and how Parliament can be able to have those views from the members of the public. Which process is available under the law?
Well, there's public participation that is supposed to be open to members of the public. You can share to the clerk of the National Assembly. You can share to us as the Law Society, because we'll be sharing our views as well. You can share to your member of parliament as members of the public. So public participation is open to each and every one individual, that you can share your personal views. You can raise memorandums as different groups, at the private sector, public sector. And so it's open. Public participation was the new part of the new changes brought under the Constitution, that members of the public can actually have their voice heard, that you don't need to wait for your member of the parliament. If your member of parliament is ignoring you, you can actually share your concerns, you can actually share your views. One of the laws chief was rendered unconstitutional because it failed on the threshold of actually carrying out public participation. If you see the rejected bill, Finance Act 2024, was because of the overwhelming public participation and the concern that members of the public even had, that they had raised their voices, they had complained, they had issued memorandum, and all of that was ignored. But people were able to share their views, even the Law Society and various groups, with regards to that particular legislation and the effect and the impact. And so similarly, you can share your views, writing to the clerk, and we'll look for his address and share, so that you can share your views to the National Assembly. We can share your views as well through the Law Society, and we'll forward all those views. And part of the Citizens Assembly is also for us to come up with joint solutions and recommendations of how we best think that we can share. And maybe it's time we thought about a platform for public participation that enables members of the public to be able to share their views without having to reach for any special numbers or email addresses, that we can actually have a platform that will track all the memorandum that has been shared, so that it's open and transparent, and they cannot say that they did not receive these emails, they did not receive these recommendations, that this number of people were not able to participate and they only got these few views. And as well, a platform that can be an online platform to ensure that as many people, irrespective of the difference in time or distance, we're able to ensure that as many people share their views and their concerns.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I think perhaps also the members of the public should know that if you go to the website of the National Assembly, you will find the respective emails of every other department in Parliament. You can be able to actually present your views through a memoranda, through those emails, and perhaps expect that they write back to you for a purpose of you presenting those views personally when the vetting process will be ongoing. I think there was a question that was asked about the constitution of the cabinet secretaries under the constitution. Article 152 provides for that process, and as you know, the president has powers to appoint a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 24. And I think Jatero asked questions about why the president will dismiss and reappoint the same people, and what implication that has on public expenditure and use and good use of public money. And I think that is a valid question. Some of those questions will be subject to a court process, so that the court can interpret as to whether, whereas the president has powers under Article 152 to hire and fire. And remember, the Gazette notice dismissing these cabinet secretaries was actually gazetted as dismissal. And a dismissal, in its explanations and interpretation, means you've been fired. And you can't be fired from an office if you didn't commit an offense. So why would you then name the same individuals? And I think that is a constitutional question as to whether the president has capacity to play around with Article 152, especially on the specific powers to dismiss and then purport to reappoint the same people. There are several constitutional questions that can only be answered by the court on that question. And of course, we are following up as the Law Society to ensure that the due process of the law, especially in appointment of cabinet secretaries, is followed. We are hoping that the members of parliament will rise to the occasion when these names are presented before them and forget about their political affiliations and actually do their work, represent the members of the public, represent the views of the people, and ensure that the individuals who are appointed to those offices meet the constitutional requirements under Article 10 and under Chapter 6 of the Constitution. I will straight allow Mr. Nyakundi.
Sorry, Mano, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, this is Abner. If I could perhaps speak, I think there are 2 or 3 questions that.
Yes, proceed, Council.
Thank you.
Proceed, Council.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'll just straight deal. There was a question as to whether those who have been reappointed are subject to vetting. I believe that once the Gazette notice was at secretary, then the process starts afresh in terms of vetting. So I believe that they will be subject to vetting again by Parliament. So just to pick from where you left, we'd encourage members of the public to submit their memorandum if they have views or opinions or something to submit to Parliament in terms of their reservations in terms of the reappointment. Then, secondly, on this legal question as to whether the Gazette notice now touches on character or suitability of office, as you have rightly put, this is a new test as regards to Article 152 of the Constitution. But remember that the biggest test is usually on the suitability in terms of gross violation of the provision of Constitution or unsuitability to hold public office as per Chapter 6. Now, I'm just reminded by the Supreme Court decision, especially as regards, if you can remember, the two legislators, somebody like Ferdinand Waititu and Mike Sonko. Remember, it is the Supreme Court that held that they are unsuitable to hold public office. So I think maybe it's subject to court decisions, because now perhaps they may appeal to courts and say that perhaps the test as to their suitability to hold public office has been exhausted in terms of the legal processes. But remember, Article 1 still gives the supreme power to the people and to the relevant houses in terms of Parliament. So we'd encourage members of the public to submit the memorandum in terms of their unsuitability if they feel so that it can be considered by Parliament during the vetting process. Thank you.
Hi, Mano, can you hear me?
Thank you, Abner. Yes, PLO, proceed kindly.
Thank you, and good morning to all the patriots again who joined this space. Good morning, my able president, Manoa, and the rest of my learned friends on board. So just to pick up on where the president left on the platform, the online platform on public participation, to just enhance the effectiveness of the comments and issues that members of the public raise on different spheres or a spectrum of governance matters. I'd like to inform you that currently we have two policy and legislative in Parliament. One is Assembly Bill number 50. As you've seen, Article 10 on national values and principles of governance. Can't you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right, thanks. Thank you. So I was mentioning the Public Participation Bill 2023 as one of the legislative interventions that we've had, in the past few months. On Article 10 on the national principles, on the national values and principles of governance, public participation forms a key component and item on such principles. So Parliament has never ever enacted a public participation bill until last year, in September, 1st September, when that bill matured, and it was first read. It was first read on 12th of October 2023. So it is still pending before the National Assembly. And then the other intervention is on the public participation policy. This is the sessional paper number 3 of 2023. So these two items, once they have been formed up, then they will give a clear framework on what matters public participation, because it's been long overdue that since the promulgation of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, almost 13 years later, that's when we are having a policy and legislative intervention on matters public participation. So I think that is a tragedy that ought to have been remedied ages ago. But nonetheless, we will take what we have and, at least make sure we have a firm foundation, where members of the public can effectively participate on different issues of governance. To move on to the issue of cabinet secretaries, where, someone asked, how will the degazettement of an entire battalion of cabinet secretaries be again some or those components of those who are dismissed still form part of the 11, member nominee that were announced yesterday. So technically, I mean, even without, going, further, the president in nominating not just 6, but even one of the dismissed cabinet secretaries is in gross violation of the Constitution and is in gross violation of the oath of office he took, when he was sworn, into office. Because when you look at Article 75 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 that provides for the conduct of state offices, and I'll move straight to sub-article 3 under Article 75. And this is the Constitution, the apex law, which provides that a person who has been dismissed or otherwise removed from office for a contravention of the provisions specified in Clause 2 is disqualified from holding any other state office. And sub-article 3 is read conjunctively with sub-article 2 and with sub-article 1. And sub-article 1 of that particular provision of the law, which provides that any state officer or a state officer shall behave, whether in public and official life, in private life, or in association with other persons, in a manner that avoids. I'll just go straight to paragraph C. Not even paragraph A and B, paragraph C, demeaning the office the officer holds. And all these grounds are what, is constituted under, sub-article 2, which sub-article 3 now, gives the final verdict that whichever clause, I mean, whether it's, sub-article 1, sub-article 2, but the final verdict under sub-article 3 that states that the moment you're dismissal, technically, it means the vote of confidence is passed against you. I mean, it means that you have, you have demeaned the office, that you hold as a state officer, and CS is part of that. So why would a president, if at all, he was in good faith, with consultation, I don't know to the extent of the consultation he made, but for me, this is gross violation of the Constitution. None of those who are dismissed from office, when the entire cabinet was sent packing, should have been in any way either perceived or real be nominated as a cabinet secretary. So that is the position that I think the president ought to have followed. That is the law as it is, not the law as it ought to be. The president is trying to rewrite the apex law, and that is, one tragedy, especially emanating from, one person who is meant to be a symbol of national unity, being a divisive figure, to the country. And then the last question I would want to answer was on the issue of involvement of the public and state officer on political activities. Back then, the Commission on Administrative Justice, that is the Office of the Ombudsman, gave an advisory opinion on the participation of public officers and the use of public resources in political activities. So I will just go directly to some of the recommendations that the Ombudsman made, because when they are by law allowed in accordance with Article 249, sub-article 1, and the Commission on Administrative Justice, 2000 Act 2011, as read, together with the Article 59, sub-article 4 of the Constitution. So when you look at the kind of recommendations that they made, which I think neither the previous government nor this government has bothered, incorporating. That's why you have, all these Harambes being banned for nothing, which in accordance with the president, that there was no law that actually banned Harambe. But there is, ours is just a moral issue. All of these things are dictated by law. When you look at the Section 13 of the Public Officers Ethics Act, it outlaws any state or public officer from using their office to to solicit for either Harambes or to contribute, all those things. But people just don't raid for the sake of their own reasons. So on the recommendations by the Office of the Ombudsman, one, they said that any appointed public officer should refrain from participating in the activities of political parties or candidates or use the public resources for such activities. The second recommendation that the Ombudsman made was that any appointed public officer who wish to participate in politics or support any political party or candidate should resign from their positions immediately. And I think that is the crux of the recommendation that ought to have been followed. But as was once, synonymous with one, the former majority leader of the National Assembly, that they would rather die than resign. So I think resignation with our public officers aren't synonymous with exactly what they practice. And then moving away from that, the government itself issued a circular, on 22nd of December 2011. And this was about this circular was circulated or disseminated to the PSs, who are the accounting officers in every ministry. It was circulated to the Auditor General. It was circulated to the Clerk of the National Assembly, the Chief Registrar of the High Court, the Secretary of the Public Service Commission, the Director General of the National Security Intelligence Service, and the Secretary Teachers Service Commission, right? And it just dealt with the political neutrality and integrity of state and public, offices. But this circular as well hasn't been fully implemented. Yeah, that is all from me. Back to you, Manuel.
Thank you, PLO, for those submissions. Perhaps if we can take another round. Josephine, are you there? You have the microphone.
Simple question. Hello, Manwa.
Yes.
Very simple question, so I can even drop off as a speaker. Could the
Thank you.
society provide us a format for memoranda, making it easy so that, for example, if I have a format for memoranda, I can then fill it out myself and forward on to the National Assembly? That's number one. Just some guidance on memoranda so that our memoranda are very professional and very well done. I've done this before, but it's not what we do every day. So that would give it, some good credibility. Number two, police killings have been a nightmare since this revolution began. Police killings have been a nightmare. And Kindiki was on a national televised media house where he was asked a direct question. And I'm asking the society here because it's full of lawyers. Kindiki was asked, when Parliament was overrun by citizens, who are the people who were carrying high caliber weapons, AK-47s, M16s, etc., in civilian clothes and masks? And he was asked, who were those people? And Kindiki answered, I don't know who those people are. And I'm telling you, I'm the Minister of Interior, and I don't know anybody who was firing a revolver, a pistol, a high caliber weapon on Parliament grounds. Those are not my officers, and I don't know who they are, and they have to face a law. My question to the society is a man like that eligible to go back to the Interior docket as Cabinet Secretary? I mean, what are we saying? A sniper killed an unarmed Kenyan. Actually, many clothed in the flag and demonstrating peacefully. They were not armed. So how is he even eligible to go back as Cabinet Secretary Interior? That's just a humble and simple question, and we want answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those questions and submissions. Maundu, were you there?
Yes, I'm right here. So I have three questions. And the first one will be the recovery of lost funds through corruption, and the culprits are never prosecuted. I don't remember a moment when we had a minister or a CS who was prosecuted for embezzling the public funds. Also, the long-term accountability policy that we should put in the system. Since independence, we have seen revolutions come and go. Like the 1992, let's say it's our parents who fought for that democracy. But after the democracy, we don't see any policy that was put into place that could help so that we don't fall back into corruption or dictatorship. Also, the Auditor General always gives their recommendations after they audit the reports, which are never followed in the county governments, nor as the national government. Those are my questions, and also the public participation. How can it be considered and be implemented by the government? We had a senator, one of the senators saying that these recommendations by the public are never put into any consideration. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. June, kindly you have the microphone. Proceed.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I have two questions. My first one is to LSK as a body. I want to ask whether or not it's possible for you to get together with Amnesty International and Kenya Human Rights Commission and file human right violations and war crime charges at the ICC towards the police heads, the cabinet secretary that got fired and is somehow getting rehired, and every police head that was in any county where somebody died, just a joint level, like a joint suit, like war crime charges, also including like police officers going to hospitals because hospitals are protected under the Geneva Convention. So that was also like gross violation of human rights. So is it possible for LSK and the rest of the human rights bodies to come up with and just sue them? Like, because the police have been acting the way they've been acting because there have been no consequences for what they've been doing. Like, they literally are just killing people with no consequences. And I don't think anybody even trusts the Kenyan court to even hold them. And even any citizen who was like kidnapped or anything, you can't even like trust that you will be safe as like a witness because you will be going and facing someone who can come into your home and break in and then just like kidnap you. So is it possible for you to take it up and go above and just go to ICC directly and file war crime charges and crimes against humanity against all these individuals, including all the officers who are also found and named on like the X timelines? Because like Rex's killer as well has already been identified. So is it possible for that to happen? My second point is towards like the cabinet secretaries. I think the problem began when we allowed that individual to go and consult himself and pick from his basket of sycophants. So maybe the movement, the citizens' movement, should front their own cabinet because he obviously cannot be trusted to bring individuals who are qualified. So maybe the citizens themselves should form their own cabinet and front it and tell him, pick here, because it clearly looks like you're not able to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, June. We can take one more, then perhaps we can have responses from the advocates on the forum. Brian Casey. Brian Casey, you have the microphone, kindly. If Brian is not there, we have Simon. Simon? Okay. President, are you there? Perhaps we can take up responses even as we wait for the other questions. And I think before you pick it up, and June has raised substantive questions in terms of instituting a case before the ICC. I think I will leave that to you for purpose of response. A question was asked by Josephine about whether we can, as the Law Society, present a format for the memorandum. If you haven't noticed, all the communications and the memoranda that the Law Society presents to the National Assembly are often shared in our forums and shared to the members of the public. But again, that is a challenge you've given us. We have a committee that is specialized to deal with the memoranda to the National Assembly, and we will be able to perhaps share a format to the members of the public through those forums for purposes of any individual who wants to present their grievances on the cabinet secretary appointees while the when the vetting starts in Parliament, can be able to actually present their views through that process. But I want to also highlight that there is no specific format for communication. If you have information, the Constitution has shied away from procedural, what we call in law, the procedural technicalities. It's the substance of what you write. You can write it on a paper, you can write it on an email, you can communicate whichever way. And I think that is the simplest way to address that question. There is no mode of presentation that is unacceptable. As long as that mode of presentation has been facilitated through the channels that are available, then it's acceptable by Parliament, and they have no reason whatsoever under the law to reject a proposal that has been presented by a member of the public. And I think we have spoken over and over again on the process of public participation and how important your views are, considering that largely the individuals we elected to represent us in Parliament have abdicated on their duty to perhaps even go to their constituents and ask them, what do you need which position are you taking on these cabinet secretaries? What do you need me to address in Parliament? Which side do you want me to vote? Because that mandate, which is donated by the members of the public, seems to be misused by the members of the members of Parliament and donated to, party affiliations. And I think that is the genesis of the big problem we have in Kenya, because we have a National Assembly which has huge powers under the Constitution, but we have individuals in those offices who do not actually know how to exercise those powers they have been given. There is a question on whether there's a question that was asked on the recovery of lost funds. I think, Madam President, if you can address that together with June's question on whether there's a possibility of a coalition of suits with other civil societies before the International Criminal Court. If you're there, Madam President.
The issue on lost funds or recovery, well, investigations must be done, and those are hue and cry, and we have agencies that can carry out investigations to ascertain where monies were stolen and tracing to be done. We have the Assets Recovery Authority, and we can also raise those concerns to the Director of Public Prosecutions that he can direct investigations to be done so that the same may be handled and tabled before the citizens, and we see charges being laid. Because as much as you can try private prosecution, it's important that also these agencies that have the capacity and the resources to actually do proper investigations and tracing and get access through court orders to different accounts, they actually implement and carry out their work on that. I noticed there are quite also still a number of advocates. I didn't get the second question, Manwa.
The question was whether the Law Society can lodge a class case before the International Criminal Court alongside other civil society. I thought it's important that you address that question
We've been working with
yourself.
the various civil society organizations. The question is the threshold, and that's why we are collecting information. We are collecting data as we analyze and what tangible information that can be presented, because it's normally how the threshold to establish whether the criminal courts, the International Criminal Court of Justice can take up the matter. However, there are other avenues that we can invite international organizations to come and also monitor and investigate, so that irrespective of the fact that we may not meet the threshold to the International Criminal Court, there are special rapporteurs who carry out who, based on what's going on in a nation, can come in as well and investigate or monitor the situation. so that things do not degenerate any further.
Thank you, Madam President. I think June also asked a question on the consequences. I think as the Law Society, we have done what we had to do, and we are requesting for the members of the public to channel information. If you know an individual is held in a particular police station, communicate that information to the Law Society. If you know someone has been held beyond that period that is constitutional, if you know that a police officer, a specific police officer who took away someone's life, who injured an individual, who committed those atrocities, it's very important that if you have documentation in form of even videos, photos, and identity, perhaps it's important that you actually channel that information to the Law Society. I indicated earlier that we have a toll number, and it's on the social pages of the Law Society of Kenya. The number is 0800720434. You can access the same on our pages, and then help us have that data for purposes of instituting proceedings. So far, we have cases in court, and nowadays I believe the responsibility has shifted from the office, because we know the individuals who hold these offices hide behind those offices to actually conduct atrocities and maim members of the public. And so some of the suits that we have filed in court we have specifically sued or mentioned as respondents the heads of those institutions, the heads of those police officers, the OCS, the IG himself, the acting IG, or any other person in those offices, for purposes of answering to the atrocities meted against the members of the public. We have habeas corpus. The number of cases we have filed on disappearances, on people who have disappeared, are now approaching 15. And in all those, of course, some of whom are some individuals who have already been released, you will notice that the majority of the individuals who were arrested who are arrested and who are disappeared have already been released. But there are some people who have been found to have been murdered, and so the Law Society is still following up on those individual cases of murder. And I think so far, it's important that you channel the information. If you know a family or an individual who was shot, who was injured by the police, and you know that they did not commit any offense, in any case, the police have no right to shoot people demonstrating peacefully in the streets. Channel that information to the Law Society of Kenya. We can take another round of questions now that we have a majority, quite a number of advocates here. Wakili, Steve, welcome. We can have Simon, then Mark. Simon, kindly. Simon, are you there? Eddie?
Yeah, my question was, now that the president has reappointed 6 of the people that he dismissed previously, will they still undergo vetting? And then for somebody like Kindiki, who we all know ordered for the police brutality before, is he still culpable of being responsible for the innocent lives that we lost? And how will we go about it as citizens? And then there's an issue that has been tabled as a bill by the senator for Kiambu on turning all the money allocated for CDF bursary into capitation. Is it possible that citizens can call out for this thing, so that the government can actually implement that thing and make education free using that CDF bursary allocation, instead of it being put in the hands of MP, while at the same time the courts are declared CDF as unconstitutional? That was my question.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Joyous, is it Joyous or Joy? Kindly, if you have the microphone. Eddie, Millicent, Nyakundi, Nyakundi, are you there? Mark? Can someone hear me?
I can hear you, Jim.
Okay. Jayus, I don't know how that name is pronounced. If you can hear me, kindly proceed. Mark? PLO, kindly if you can pick up on some of the questions even as we add more speakers.
Hi, can you hear me? There's that last bit of that particular question that I'm trying to connect to what I have with me. So just to recap, the last bit, Manuel.
Yes, which question?
Should be the second last question, I believe.
I think the question was on the vetting process, and I think that had already been answered earlier. Perhaps if you can respond to the same, and then the question of Kindiki taking up the same appointment, and the question of the killings that happened under his watch.
Well, thank you. First things first, I mean, Professor Kithure Kindiki, as the media, has been highlighting the same as being an international lawyer. For me, I think one can't be an internationally recognized lawyer if one doesn't conform to the international standards on human rights protection and the best practices that actually do govern not just the right to protest, but equally the right to life, which is domesticated under our laws under Article 26. So he is first an advocate, actually, before he is a cabinet secretary. And prior to him being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, he is a citizen, by birth. So it behooves me that, one, an advocate of the High Court, I mean, a member of the Law Society of Kenya, person who took an oath to protect, defend, and uphold the rule of law will be the same person who will come and violate all these human rights without blinking. And for him, it's actually more or less like, doing that which his office, mandates him to do. But it is wrong. One, on the context of him actually not, speaking on the basis of protection of human rights. I mean, safeguarding the right to protest under Article 37. Equally, I mean, just trying to whip the Inspector General of Police. I mean, the commandants under him. But for him, it's about optics over accountability, and that's what is ailing our nation, because ours, like I said, is just It's just a moral issue. I mean, we have laws, we have good laws with us, but the people implementing those laws are the people who defile, the same laws, and having no issue to the same. Kindiki, just like the rest of the cabinet secretaries who are dismissed from office, should not even be vetted. Why? Because they are already dismissed by virtue of, bringing shame and dishonor or disrepute to the office they held. And like I earlier mentioned on Article 75(3), that is enough for the president. Not to keep on defiling the law, because what the president is doing is contempt. It is spitting, on fundamental, rights and freedom. The oath of office that he took when he was being sworn into office. So anyone who was dismissed from that particular list should not even feature, anywhere as a nominee. Let other new, fresh and blood people who were not part and parcel of a previous cabinet, to come and take the chances, because Kenya isn't short of, capable people. Leaders with ethics and integrity. I saw the tweet by the Homa Bay Town MP. I don't want to mention his name, because sometimes, equally, it's tragic, how people think. And when he says that, those were in the previous cabinet will never be vetted in this new cabinet. That's a wrong position. The only time that vetting will never take place if there is a reshuffle. But the moment you're dismissed from office, you have to undergo vetting. But there's a catch. If you're dismissed from office, you're not even supposed to form, part of that list of persons that, the National Assembly will be vetting. So I think there is a lot of misinformation, and some coming from people that we would think could have held, others in power to be accountable of their actions, but that the same people, trying to dig, the hole far much deeper than we already have found ourselves in. So that's how I'll respond to that question. On the issue of the killings, yeah, it's tragic, and but not just Rex, Kenyeki, but even 50 plus, souls that we lost. I saw the other day the Daily Nation published, the headline with 50, souls that we've lost along the way, deaths that could have been, avoided. So I think accountability, not just for the IG who apparently resigned, but even, those still in office. So back to you, Manuel. So I'll be listening into more of the questions and respond later.
Thank you, PLO. Thomas, you have the microphone. Kindly proceed.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to ask 3 questions. Number one, you realize that there are so many people who are getting arrested, and these people, these people are getting arrested. Some, they don't have access to lawyers. So suppose I have been arrested and taken to court, and in that case you find that I don't have money to pay a lawyer. 2, I don't have access to any lawyer. So what am I supposed to do in that scenario where I've been arrested because of demonstration, I've been taken to court, I don't have money to pay for a lawyer. 2, I don't have any access to a lawyer. So what am I supposed to do to proceed? Because you realize most of the citizens who are getting arrested, they don't have that capacity to access to lawyers. What are they supposed to do? Then question number 2 is about the Law Society. You need to explain to us that is it fair that every moment we have a public participation, it is only happening in Nairobi, it is only happening to those people who have access to technology. You are being told to send your memoranda through email. So is there a way we can expand the public participation even to the chief's level, whereby a person in Lamu, a person in Wajir can be able to proceed to the chief's office, give the memoranda, and then the government takes over from there? Because when we limit the public participation only to be happening in Nairobi. On the TV, we see in the TV people in the boardroom participating in the public participation and the environments of the big cities. So what is the space of that citizen in Busia? What is the space of a citizen in Turkana and in all those marginalized areas? So is there a way we can expand the public participation to be taking place through the government avenues, that is through the chiefs, so that we can get close to the people? Then question number 3, the law society, please. I want to ask you to, on the issue of corruption, is there a way the law society can regulate its lawyers to the level that you limit your lawyers not to be taking cases of corruption of people who have been accused of corruption of like 1 million, 100 million plus, those big cases. So as we handle the issue of corruption, we have seen lawyers representing people who have been involved in capital crimes. So is there a way law society can regulate their lawyers so that we handle the issue of corruption by not representing those guys who have been involved in capital crimes? Because I know of a lawyer, I will not mention the name, who doesn't take a case of CK, that is canon knowledge. There are those lawyers, you present to them such a case, they will not take it. So if we have a lawyer who doesn't take those cases as a way of trying to bring good moral in the society, so is there a way LSK can also regulate its lawyers so that we limit the issue of corruption by not representing those big thieves in courts? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas. We'll take one more, then get the intervention of the President. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande. Dr. Kamande, are you there? Okay, Laibon. Mr. Laibon. Ngede. Ngede, are you there? Big ticket. Kindly don't request the microphone if you do not have any contributions to make, so that we allow many contributors. Even as we wait for those other questions, I think some fundamental questions have been placed, especially on LSK by Thomas. I will start with your last question, and I'll allow the President to respond to some of the other questions. On the question of advocates representing corrupt people who are involved in corruption, it's not in the place of the law society to regulate its members as to which client you will pick as an individual and which client you will not pick. That is the responsibility of the advocate. They are advocates of the High Court of Kenya. They have the best judgment to choose who to represent and who not to represent. And secondly, there is something we call in law the cab rank rule. The cab rank rule requires that an advocate cannot refuse to represent someone. And again, I put this scenario. We have had people who have been involved in robbery with violence shot by police officers. When they are arrested, they are taken to court. They have a right to be treated. And doctors do not refuse to treat people who have been injured while committing a crime. And so there's a reason why the law provides that an advocate cannot actually refuse to represent an individual, because under our constitution, every accused person has a right to be represented by an advocate of their choice. And the reason why the law envisions that is so that you can help, the advocate helps the court largely to ensure that an innocent person is not convicted of an offense. Remember, it's not the advocate who determines whether someone is guilty or not. The advocate's work is to represent that person and to ensure that the due process of the law is properly followed, to ensure that the crime so alleged to have been committed, the person so alleged to have committed the crime is subjected through a due process as the law provides, so that when a conviction is made, the rule of law is perceived to have been followed. You've asked a question about access to lawyers, especially individuals who have been arrested. I think we have been very vocal as the Law Society on representation of individuals who have been arrested by the members, by police officers. And across the country, we have advocates representing accused persons, specifically individuals who have been exercising their right under Article 37 on assembly and picketing. And these advocates have been doing this work pro bono on behalf of the Law Society across the country. And so if you are arrested and you think you're produced in court, trust me, there will be representation from the Law Society on the question if you are arrested while demonstrating peacefully. If you committed other offenses like destruction of property, other offenses that were not specifically in line with Article 37, then the Law Society might not want to take up that matter, because any other crime beyond that, you have a right to look for your own advocate to be able to represent you. But if you are arrested in line, and of course we know there are trumped up charges, certain police officers purport to draw trumped up charges, and I want to thank the DPP somehow to an extent for refusing to charge or allow a charge that essentially is trumped up. And of course, we are keen to look at those charge sheets before we even pick up representation. And it's very important that you know that those are the people we offer representation to across the country. That pro bono service is available to the members of the public through the Law Society of Kenya. And I think the last question you asked was the public participation. I don't know whether, Madam President, you can pick that up, the question on public participation to be being devolved across the country. If you can hear me.
I will, on public participation, that is something that we've talked about, something that we have this.
Sorry, we lost you, Madam President.
On public participation, the issue that arises is, yes, having to deliver your documentation, but also government ideally should be able to facilitate public participation. And that is why we're looking at, this will be part of the recommendations we'll be picking with regards to how can we ensure we facilitate public participation, that people's views from all over the country can be obtained. And even if it's a platform, we're thinking around a platform that everyone can be able to share views and that it's received. And it's a open and transparent platform that not necessarily to be controlled by government, but open to all members of the public, that you're able to share your views, and even different avenues that we can ensure that whatever memorandum you present, that they're able to reach the destination that ought to. And so that is something that we can think around, because when it comes to bill, government organizes public participation, but we've also seen the concerns over a period of time that where the public participation barazas are hosted are far away from people, so to effectively ensure that certain people are not able to participate. So that is something we'll be thinking around and seeing how to ensure we are able to enable public participation. Someone asked about vetting, and I say vetting must be done for the nominees, because such an analogy that they don't go for vetting afresh would mean that as long as you are ever a public, you are CS or a PS, then even when a new president comes, then you don't need to go to vetting. That's a very narrow-minded perception. Even these CSAs ought to be vetted and people share concerns, even within the tenure that they have held those particular offices, as to why they should be granted that other opportunity to continue to serve the people of Kenya. And so vetting must be done, and that's why you have that option to share your memorandum, share your views with your member of parliament or the National Assembly, such that these nominees, Parliament can be able to vet them, take into consideration any views, accusations, or complaints that may have even arisen within their tenure for the old ones that have held office. And of course, the new ones must be vetted.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Can we have Kefa?
Hello?
Kefa, we can hear you. Proceed kindly.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, this is James, not Kefa. But I
Okay,
think I can
James,
just
proceed.
speak. I want to just raise two issues. First of all, thank you for this forum. I think we're also learning so much. But I have just something different a bit. First of all, we are having sometimes two or three parallel spaces speaking about the same thing, X spaces speaking about the same thing. So maybe I think to amplify our voices, I think if possible that we're able to have a combined space because we are talking about the same thing. Maybe just my proposal. The other issue is something of a very street thinking mentality. I know, yes, we are talking about continuing the peaceful protest, but still the forces, the police make it appear like it's chaotic and all that. But I have observed one thing, that whenever we are in the streets, you find that when we have, like for example, our ladies at the forefront, it's like the police have a soft spot for them. You find that rarely are they aggressive when we have ladies on the front line, but whenever it's our young men, it becomes a bit more chaotic. So I was just thinking aloud and maybe thinking that also if you can be able to have a very forceful presence of our ladies at the forefront, maybe we can showcase that we are peaceful, and I'm sure the police is like they have a soft spot. I have noted that. Maybe just a streetwise thinking, so that at least we are able to have people like we feel that maybe the police are feeling like mercy for them. They're not clobbering them. We have not really seen so many young ladies being clobbered, and I think that some of the messages they are portraying outside there, it makes even the protest appear like it's for all of us, the youth. So just my opinion, maybe we can have some more ladies at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We can have Aaron. Aaron.
Thank you, Mansa. I have two questions. Number one, I think majority of Kenyans support the Gen Z and the issues they have raised. And my concern is that even as we protest and so forth, we need to be sure that we need to follow the legal way as much as possible, so that we have only one country. We don't want to ban it. So my question to Madam President and others who are on the channel on this particular space, what kind of legal steps, practical legal steps can be taken to give effect to the issues that Gen Zs have raised and which majority of Kenyans agree with, step by step, all the way. What is there, what has been exhausted, what is to be done, and so forth. The second issue is that some time back, I think it's Justice Maraga ruled or commented, I can't remember what it was, that because the two-thirds gender rule hadn't been implemented by Parliament, that in effect, Parliament stood dissolved. What is the position on that? Because that would be a very easy way of, instead of going through the lengthy process of recalling these fellows, have it dissolved, and then, you know, the Gen Zs who are majority can help, you know, remodel this parliament by getting people who are likely to help us. I was happy to hear that, I think it was PLO who advanced the position that those fellows who have been reappointed in this particular cabinet, really it is illegal. And I think majority of Kenyans would agree with that. But what the laws provides is quite another, and we are going to watch the space. And the Law Society should take the lead, and they have done very, very well. And congratulations to the Law Society led by Faith. What you are doing for this country is absolutely amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aaron. We can have Hosea. Hosea, kindly. Richard.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I just want to talk about the representation of the people. You find that we elect the parliamentarians to go and present our views, but again, we've always seen that they don't represent our views, but they represent the views of maybe the parties that have sponsored them or the leaders who are behind them. And so I feel that you find again these parties also benefit from our resources because at the end of the year, there's some allocation that these parties are given. If you look at the Political Parties Act, I think Part 3, Sections 23, 24, and 25 talks about the funding to these parties. And I think they are given 0.3% of the national revenue. And this comes about because someone talks about when they get to the parliament, then there's that jostle. Some independent candidates now cross over to certain parties. And this should not happen. So I feel that this clause should be maybe abolished so that the revenue that these people are getting from this should help us do something else. Because again, you find that there are parties that are sponsoring people to parliament, yes, but again, they don't represent the views of the people, but they represent the views of either the party leadership or the leaders behind it. So I think there's poor representation of that, and that money should be used to do something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ombati.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question, and that pertains to the legality of changing our tactics. I was thinking maybe if we can force every person who is working, we tell them not to work, to go to work, let's say on Tuesday and Thursday, and whoever who disobeys that corrective agreement of the people of Kenya will be dealt with. What is the legal position of that? The second thing about corruption, in our laws, do we have punishment for corruption? Secondly, what is the threshold for someone to be convicted? Because you can't tell me that money gets lost, and we have people who signed, and we are told like we cannot trace that money. How? Can we lower the threshold of corruption so that way we can easily deal with these people? Because it becomes not easy when we know the procurement departments and the people signing the money are there, but we say the money is lost. Those are my two questions.
Thank you, Lumadede. Then we can have responses. Lumadede.
Yes, thank you so much. I had three issues. One is the issue of education that has already been been handled. Maybe to just emphasize, if there is a way that we can force the issues of bursary to be in an education fund, if there's an official way of doing that, so that it is not at the any of the different members of parliament and elected officials, it can be good. Then, secondly, I was just thinking these issues of accountability. Is it could it be now a good time to maybe have an accountability act whereby we are specific that a government employee has to be accountable in this way, and if they are not accountable in those different ways that are spelled out in the act, then there is a specific punishment for it. Maybe having an accountability act will solve some of these issues of impunity that we see here and there, where you see even a CS goes to the TV and he says he doesn't know the people who are shooting. That means that person in a country that works, that person will not be there as the CS the next day. But in our country, impunity is the normal thing. Then the third one, on the issues of police brutality. I was thinking, maybe we are trying to solve the symptoms, but then we are not really trying to solve the real issues. What if we also have a formal way where we petition? I don't know if petition is the right word, where we look at police right from the recruitment, that instead of looking at instead of the requirements being a police officer should have a D+ or something, we also look at the emotional intelligence of a police officer. That, some of these things, it's a police officer who didn't have the emotional intelligence of dealing with a particular issue. And because of a number of things, and this also leads to their training. Why can't we also look at their curricula? Because I don't think even the police college has an aspect of emotional intelligence. The other day, the Charles Owino was speaking in the media, and then what he said was that when a police officer is in a particular situation, and the situation that he was describing isn't a situation that demands that a police officer should use live bullets or something. So I was wondering, that shows you that right from their training, these people are not trained on how to really handle these people, really handle citizens, because they are still using the colonial script of handling issues. And I think that if we can have also some effort directed towards overhauling that aspect of the police, it can also be good. That, and also the issues on corruption, I think those are the issues that I had. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can allow Abner to respond to some of those questions. Abner, do you have the microphone?
Yes. Thank you, Manwa. I think I'll just pick the last one in terms of the police and how they've been handling the demonstrators, or those who are picketing. I choose to call them that. I think we've experienced a lot of police brutality, and for me, it goes more towards in terms of leadership, or in terms of how they are led and the kind of instructions they're given. Remember, the Law Society has gone to the extent of petitioning the High Court in terms of buying the police from using excessive force and equipment such as the water cannon and the tear gases to tarnish and break away peaceful demonstrators. And we have gotten orders to such extent, but unfortunately the police have continued to orchestrate a lot of brutality and force against peaceful citizens who are advocating for their rights. So first of all, it is a matter of leadership. we expected that at the point of which the former Inspector General resigned, we had hoped that we would see a difference in terms of how the police are conducting themselves. But unfortunately, we witnessed a lot of police brutality. This week on Wednesday, we were in court where we represented 109 peaceful Kenyans who were demonstrating. And unfortunately, we witnessed so many of them who were injured, who could not even walk. They had bruises. And these are some of the actions that we will be calling upon the Inspector General and the police service to take responsibility in terms of how they have handled the Kenyans. But I agree with you, but perhaps it goes down to things like training. I mean, emotional intelligence is something that perhaps goes to how somebody has been trained. So perhaps as a nation, this is a conversation we should have in terms of what kind of training are our officers given, and perhaps what kind of people do we want to have in the service serving Kenyans as police officers. I'd pick another question on. I think one of us asked if we can have a directive where if somebody does not chooses to go to work and does not demonstrate, perhaps if we could have them reprimanded or punished and so forth. I think the Constitution of Kenya makes Kenya a democratic country, and you will agree with me, not every single Kenyan is for this type of protest. There are those Kenyans who are opposed to these recent demonstrations. We recently saw a research by TIFA that was commissioned by TIFA that showed the kind of responses that Kenya have towards the recent demonstrations that we've had. So we would agree. You would agree with me that not every Kenyan is in support of this demonstration. So Kenya as a democracy, you cannot force each and every one of us to be part of this demonstrator. So I would agree with one of the speakers who said that perhaps if we could have a unity of thought, perhaps if we could not have so many perhaps platforms where we are communicating the same thing, so that it makes it easier for those who are in support of these demonstrations to have maybe one agenda, move in one direction, rather than having splinter groups. But we, as a democracy, cannot force each and every single Kenyan to be part of perhaps something that, in their own right, they do not subscribe to. I'll pick those two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Lord Masaba, your question, kindly, if you can shoot. Richard? Mwageka. Rian? Ryan, whichever. Rian, can someone hear me?
We can hear you.
Robert, kindly, if you've requested the microphone, kindly, and you can't speak, drop it so that we can add more speakers to the speaker box. Robert? Robert, can you hear me? Masaba, you still have the microphone, kindly.
Perhaps, Manwa, as we wait for some of our speakers to get ready, I've just seen somebody send me a message. They had inquired on the 2/3 gender rule in terms of compliance of the constitutional threshold, that the cabinet should not have 2/3 of the same gender as members of the said cabinet. From what we saw yesterday from the first 11, clearly, unless we are jumping the gun, there could be possibility that that particular rule will not be complied with. Previously, we've seen the previous cabinets that we've had since the inauguration of promulgation, of the new constitution 2010, that no previous cabinet has met the constitutional threshold of the 2/3 gender rule. So perhaps we could be a bit patient and see how the next half of the cabinet will be constituted, and perhaps that could form part of the grounds in which members of the public could petition or submit the memorandum as to the unsuitability of the cabinet. The 2/3 gender rule is a constitutional threshold, and I think the government, the president, being the head of the executive, has direct control, power, and authority to make sure that that particular provision of law is complied with. Unlike the legislature, which the people directly elect, and perhaps no one has really control as to the constitution or the compliance with the 2/3 gender rule. In terms, when it comes to the executive, I believe that the president has the power to make sure that that particular provision of law is complied with. So perhaps if we could wait and see the second half or the second 11 of this particular cabinet, then we would be able to also submit our memorandum as to the unsuitability of the cabinet in terms of compliance with the 2/3 gender rule. Thank you.
Manuel,
Thank you,
just to add on to
Council.
that.
Yes, proceed kindly, PLO.
Thank you. Just to add on to the 2/3 gender rule. Well, Parliament cannot just be dissolved on not just for eroding the sanctity of Parliament, but it can't be devolved for failure to even enact any particular legislation within the specified time period. And any person, including you, patriots, who are on this particular call, can petition the High Court on this particular matter. And then the High Court, now in determining this petition, should be under sub-article 5 of Article 261, which basically talks about the consequential legislation. So once you do this, then the High Court, in determining that petition, can make a declaratory order on that matter, and then I'll transmit that order directing Parliament and the AG to take steps to ensure that the required legislation, which is enacted within that period specified, should be reported, to the Chief Justice in terms of progress that was made. And that is why on the 21st of September 2020, when the Chief Justice Emeritus, issued an advisory to the President pursuant to Article 261, sub-article 7, to dissolve Parliament for failure to enact legislation on the 2/3 gender rule. That particular advisory opinion, had 27 paragraphs. And I will just refer you to the 26th paragraph of that particular opinion, and I will quote David Maraga verbatim. He says that in the circumstances, let us endure pain if we must, if only to remind ourselves as a country that choices, and particularly choices on constitutional obligations, have consequences. Let us endure pain if only to remind the electorate to hold their parliamentary representatives accountable. Let us endure pain if only to remind ourselves that as a country, being a democracy that has chosen to be governed by the rule of law, we must say no to impunity and hold everyone accountable for their actions or omissions. That was David Maraga in that advisory opinion. And that is what I advise all of us and beseech all of us, implore to all of us to maintain that particular mindset. Back to you, Manuel.
Thank you, Council, for that. Let me invite several other speakers to ask their questions and make contributions. Bad Girl. Then we can have Nick. Bad Girl, are you there? Nick, kindly proceed.
Thank you. First, let me take this opportunity to sincerely thank the Law Society of Kenya for the work they have done to Kenyans over the past 1 month. For the most part, I think it's the Law Society of Kenya that remains as the beacon of hope for those of us that are protesting for a fair Kenya. We go to the street knowing that someone will cover my back should things go bad, and that is the Law Society of Kenya. So hats off to our able Madam President, and we thank you and your team. I'd like to ask, make a bit of commentary, but also ask a few questions that pertains to the way the country is being governed at the moment. We rely on the members of parliament, and particularly the role of the opposition in parliament, to be able to provide checks and balances to the executive in terms of legislation, accountability, and also representation of the people. And I do understand that our members of parliament are required to be able to listen to the people, take the interest of the people, and be able to amplify that and project that in form of laws and regulations in parliament. Now, we are very certain that the opposition is led by the Azimio is going to join government. It's an open secret. It's going to happen. And at the point that that happens and Azimio and Kenya Kwanza becomes one, Azimio is going to certainly support, or ODM or whatever they call themselves, are going to support the position of the government, are going to support the government agenda, are going to support legislation for the government, regardless of the intention and the purposes of those laws that will come through our parliament. They are no longer going to fight for the people. Now, that being the case, therefore, if the role of the opposition is no longer going to stand in parliament as required by law, what is going to be the recourse for the population to be able to take the responsibility of having just and fair society that is supposed to be guided and supported by a political system? Because now we are no longer going to have members of parliament that are pro-government and members of parliament that are checking that government. What is going to be the recourse for the population to deal with that situation? Because it is coming and we need to start thinking about it. And my second issue is with regards to the revolution that is going on. And I do think that revolution is basically the voice of the people. People are coming out and saying, no, we don't want it this way. And as a result of that, we saw this happen during mandamanos in the past, where the only way they count mandamanos is by bringing in the criminals, the thugs that then justify the involvement of the police to be able to bring down and silence the voices of the people. And this is going to happen. And that is actually how the government has managed to be able to bring down the voices that were dissenting in the streets. Bring in the goons, embed them into the demonstrating people, then start to beat, kill, and maim the innocent people that are just trying to talk about their rights, and leave these other criminals walking scot-free to come back to the streets another day to be able to silence the voice of the people. I am just asking myself, what other alternatives as a population do we have as the people of Kenya to be able to continue to speak our voices and voice our frustrations against this completely failed regime without putting the lives of our people at risk? We know so well that it is the government and the police and the deep state that is basically banning businesses, shooting at people, but at the same time turning the guns to the innocent people, arresting them, following them, abducting them, without any recourse for justice for the same people. Now, some of this, basically, I don't expect anyone to answer. Some of these are just basically my frustration and the frustration of so many other people. But I do think that there should be a reason somewhere. We've seen what is going on in Bangladesh. We've seen what is going on in other parts of the world, that it is possible to be able to bring in change in our society through civil disobedience, peaceful civil disobedience. It is possible, and we are going to do it. But we have to think of strategies, means, and ways of accomplishing this in the current Kenya, with the history that we have about the police and the state.
Thank you, Nick. I hope you're done.
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brian?
Thank you so much, Manua. First of all, I want to start with an opening statement that lawyers are the defenders of rule of law, and they are also the abaters of injustice in our country. Why? A good case study is the ODPP Renson Omulele. This guy is cleaning people, withdrawing cases every day without even reasoning the impact of withdrawing those millions of cases. Another thing, I want us to look at it in this way. We've glorified theft in this country to an extent that even the people who are in school, they are praying that I hope I get a job in government so that I can steal and become rich. That is the level of theft that we have. It has got into our minds that everybody is praying, is looking for an opportunity to go into the government or governor or even any state in government so that they can also have a seat at the table where they'll loot their share and retire when the right time comes. We need to have a change of mentality that corruption needs to be taught back in school so that people should know that what the effects of corruption, what it's doing to our healthcare and our education system. Then I have a few questions to all the wakilis. What is keeping Waluke in parliament really? This guy was convicted, in that maize scandal thing, but he's still in parliament. What are you doing to ensure that the likes of Waluke are not in parliament? Question number 2, I'll go to judiciary. What is LSK doing to fast track corruption cases such as the Golden Bag, the Chicken Gate, the FKF, the NYS cases? Because you'll find that there are so many cases, corruption cases in court, and there are lawyers there are judges and magistrates who keep on pushing the dates ahead each and every time. So there is no justice, because justice delayed is justice denied. Then again, what is LSK doing to hold the rogue ODPP from washing and cleaning these corrupt politicians and sanitizing their theft by withdrawing cases? LSK needs to take stern action against the ODPP, even if it means register him for being a lawyer. That is one way of dealing with these rogue people. Then what action is LSK taking against the magistrate and judges who stole cases? Then how can we push for lifestyle audit of judges and magistrates and the judicial staff? Because you'll find that in some countries, private practice is something that many people love and enjoy. But in Kenya, so many lawyers are running to become lawyers and to become judges and magistrates. Why? A magistrate within 3 or 4 years will be a billionaire by the time he or she is retiring. Yet the salary is a few thousands, hundreds of thousands. But the bribes there are so much. What is LSK doing to ensure we have regular lifestyle audit on all the judicial staff? Then lastly, I'm still going to go to the Omulele guy. What course of action can the LSK institute cases, especially these corrupt cases that the Omulele is withdrawing? Can the LSK initiate criminal proceedings against Omulele so that he can be held accountable to all the cases he's withdrawing? Thank you guys and have a good day.
Thank you, Brian. I think I need to remind you all that as the president indicated earlier, the session here was to collect your views largely so that we don't spend more time responding to as many questions as possible. It's important to remind you also that we had requested that if you have information that you think can help us build data on the disappearances, on the questions of arbitrary arrest, on the questions of individuals who have lost their lives and the families. As a law society, we are still collecting that information, and we need perhaps you guys to assist us, to assist the members of the public through our toll number that we shared earlier, that is 0800720434. You can get it on our pages, on all social media pages for the Law Society of Kenya. I have had a few questions. I don't know whether the president is there, but I want to respond to some of them. There is a question that was asked about what Waluke is doing in Parliament. We are equally concerned as to why he's in Parliament, having been convicted over, corruption cases. And of course, we know that the case is on appeal. But again, as a country, we watered down Article 10 and Chapter 6 constitutional requirement for holders of public office in 2013. If you remember, we allowed, the IEBC allowed the aspirant then for the position of the president and deputy president to run for office while they were actually answering to allegations before the International Criminal Court. Since then, we have had all manner of people being approved by the IEBC to run for office while they have ongoing cases. And I think it's time to rethink those provisions under the Constitution on leadership and integrity. The Parliament attempted, of course, through the Public Officers Ethics Act, to try and implement the requirements under Article 10 and Chapter 6 generally on individuals we allow to run for office. And I think it's an ongoing conversation, especially on the question of ensuring that individuals who have cases and who have been, especially those who have been convicted, there is an argument that, of course, you must wait for the court to declare that you are guilty of the offense that you are alleged to have committed. But again, it's a debatable question, because you remember when we had the case of a former governor whose quote-unquote girlfriend was found murdered, there were several questions whether that governor can continue to hold office. And again, we call upon these county assemblies. And these individuals create precedents that are followed over and over again that paint a bad picture to the kind of leadership we have. And somehow we take the blame as members of the public for the individuals that we choose to elect to hold, or rather to represent us in Parliament. If we took time when we were going to the ballot, scrutinize the individuals who present themselves for office, look at their character, their previous conduct, and reject them on the ballot, that is a sovereign duty that you have under Article 1 of the Constitution. While exercising it, ensure that perhaps you understand and know the individual that you are electing. Of course, most of our electorate assume that the handouts given, and of course we have created this demon called Parliament. When the elections come, we receive handouts from these politicians and then proceed to actually elect them. And while we do so, we leave out people who could have offered proper representation to the members of the public in the National Assembly and in the Senate. So we have a duty ourselves as the members of the public to actually ensure that we keep scrutinizing, we keep asking questions, we keep referring back to the provisions of the Constitution on leadership and integrity, and ensure that the individuals we have in office do not have any allegations of corruption. Because the moment we elect them, there is almost certainty that they will continue to propagate the said corruption within the leadership positions that we offer them. There was a question on what LSK is doing to hold the DPP on withdrawal of criminal cases. Aware the president, and I think she will be able to respond to this herself. The Law Society has raised these concerns with the DPP through several letters that we have written to the DPP, raising questions as to why individuals whose cases are in court, why the DPP would choose to withdraw such cases. I've had even the courts, some at some point refuse to withdraw certain cases when the DPP has actually requested to withdraw them and insist that those matters go to trial. So it's an ongoing conversation, and I think I'll leave that question to Madam President to be able to address it properly. There are magistrates who stall cases. Indeed, that is true. The judiciary is not an angel. I think, and I believe the judiciary is part and parcel of the problems that we're having in the country today. And of course, as the Law Society of Kenya, we intend to hold them accountable to the last man, especially on matters that are before them that are public interest in nature. We are having that conversation with them to hold accountable individual judges and magistrates who prolong cases, who issue decisions without notice to parties. I believe there's a complaint that has been made in the public domain about a judgment that was issued in secrecy. And those are some of the issues and concerns we are addressing, even though we know that the judiciary, the independence of the judiciary is protected. We cannot allow them to misuse the discretion and the powers they have been given by the people of Kenya to actually go against the rule of law and be partisan to promoting unconstitutional processes. As to the lifestyle audit of the judges, I think that is a new conversation that needs to be done. There was a conversation in Parliament that all public officers should actually be subjected to a lifestyle audit, and that includes judges and magistrates who serve us in the judiciary. And this is a conversation, obviously, that the Law Society will continue to follow up and ensure that definitely we have proper people within the judiciary, from the highest office at the Supreme Court to the lowest office at the Small Claims Court. I don't know whether, Madam President, you are there. You can make your intervention before I invite Dudley.
With regards to withdrawal of cases, that's a concern that we had, and we have continually raised. Sometimes the DPP citing inadequate evidence, but that is a concern that we have raised, and we said the moment they should make a decision whether to charge or not, so that we do not have a scenario of cases being withdrawn. But we raised with regards to the proposed withdrawal by the ESCC, the withdrawal of the case for the former governor of Migori, and we saw that one now taking off again. And we'll continue to raise concern the moment we hear any cases that are being withdrawn. And we will also now hold the DPP accountable as well, because once they make the to be a fair arbiter, because it's also prejudicial for you to be taken through the criminal justice system. You're charged, you're put on your defense to respond to charges, you hire lawyers, and you go through all the psychological as well trauma to be taken through the rigors of the criminal justice system, only for one day the matter to be withdrawn, that there was insufficient evidence. It's also an indictment to that office if there are more cases that continue to be withdrawn. And we also raised concern with politician cases being withdrawn. We hope we will not be seeing the same, and we'll be more vigilant, as well as the DPP taking equally proactive role, not just condemning the destruction of private property, but to also condemn and take action with regards to officers that have abused the Bill of Rights. So that is something we'll follow up with.
Thank you, Madam President. Dudley?
Thank you, Madam President, for the opportunity. I wish to send my sympathies to those who've been affected adversely by this. And Madam President, there's a particular issue of those who are still missing. Joseph Mwangi Kairu, the mother looked for him for nearly a month, and no mother has cried the way Kairu's mother cried. Then it turns out that Kairu has all along been held at Muthaiga and other police stations. I think that there are questions that the OCS for Muthaiga needs to answer. And Madam President, perhaps we also need to conduct a sweep as LSK of the police stations in Nairobi and around Nairobi to see how many Kenyans are still being held in communicado in those police stations. I've seen on the timeline today that there's someone who is at industrial area and has been there for quite some while. What happens is that it's possible for some of these citizens to have slipped through the gaps when LSK was bailing out people from the police stations. Those who were maybe arrested later in the evening or held without being booked on the occurrence books. We could conduct a sweep, a legal aid clinic, specialized legal aid clinic for them to try and find out who is still missing and is being unlawfully detained. And to the police officers who've done this, we have about 47 regional commanders or county commanders and just about 100 OCSs. LSK has up to 24,000 members. We need to begin filing the petitions at IPOA in court for individual responsibility. The case against Koome should have gone in by now so that he faces the consequences of his actions. We need to fight back legally so that these police officers realize that they are also officers of the law, they are agents of the Constitution, and they have no license to be anarchists while accusing peaceful and unarmed citizens of anarchy. Let's move in that direction, the direction of resisting tyranny, of resisting oppression, of resisting state-sponsored terrorism using the legal tools that we have. The other thing that I wish to speak about is this issue of endgame. What is the endgame? The supporters of the status quo ask. The endgame is greater accountability, greater responsiveness. We want responsible and prudent use of our taxes. We do not want corruption cases being withdrawn from the courts. We do not want budgeted corruption. We do not want citizens who are stretching under an oppressive tax regime to lose their money being spent, in useless things. I've seen now State House is asking back for the 1.5 billion budget. I mean, those are things we do not want to see. People did not die for the status quo to continue. So let us sustain the movement. Let us press from every corner, demand accountability from your public servants. That's what they are. They are your public servants. Let's press from every corner. It doesn't have to end in the deposition of the president because it's shown that he wouldn't go anywhere. But accountability is something that we have and we must get. And for that reason, this idea of recycling, the same people have been there. Professor, my teacher, Kithure Kindiki, has our blood on his hands. How can he still be the CS for Interior? It's a joke, it's a mockery of those who've died. It's a mockery of the Kenyan people. It shows that the president and the people around him are tone deaf. They're not willing to listen. And we must press for accountability. Thank you so much, Madam President.
Thank you, Dudley, for those contributions. We can take more interventions. Joan, you have the microphone. Kindly, if you can proceed.
Thank you so much, team. Thank you, Madam President, for this opportunity. Mine is a quick one, a question and a comment. The question first. I was in a meeting the other day and I had someone mention about Article 1 and 2 that has been used over time to exploit and embezzle funds. This is an article that gives the CS Treasury a mandate or a right to approve funds that have been requested for. And these are funds that never saw them, that were never budgeted for and never made it to the budget draft. For example, the last Madaraka Day, he approved 1 billion shillings for the same. So my question is this a place where this can be challenged Yes, it is in the constitution, but what protection do we have? Because now it looks like this is the place where they are all going for to loot. On the what has just happened, clearly it shows in this country you have to be incompetent to be given a position. These guys were fired because he himself, he said that were incompetent. But again, they're back. Either he's out of touch to get in this.
Thank you, Joan. Dr. Kasim?
Okay, thank you, LSK, for this opportunity. I have some 4 questions. First one is about Article 257, which talks about the amendment of the Constitution. Now, my question is, it talks of that for the Constitution to be amended, we should collect 1 million signatures from registered voters. Does that article limit? Now, like most of the people who have been in these demonstrations, maybe somebody has not registered as a voter. As if that if I'm not a registered voter and I'm Kenyan citizen with a national ID, I cannot participate in amending the Constitution. The second one, about these other independent organizations, like we have teachers, we have doctors, like in the code of conduct for teachers, they normally say that teachers should not participate in political activities. When you go to the Bill of Rights, everybody has a right to participate in the political activities of our country. So does a code of conduct of a certain association supersede the Constitution? Then I may seek some interpretation of Article 152, which says cabinet secretaries should not be members of parliament. What was in the mind of the drafters? Should we be happy people who are members of parliament, then they resign to take up cabinet slots? Or what was exactly the intent of the Constitution? Then now the last one, about the impartiality of our speaker. If the Speaker of the National Assembly appears to be taking sides with the government, what does the larger population have? Like we have seen clearly the current Speaker of the National Assembly side portray outright favor to the government side. What do we have as the citizens? How can we address that? Then lastly, if we were to propose for an amendment of the Constitution, like we have been talking of limiting the number of elected posts, what if these people collect 1 million signatures and the amendment is rejected by the county assemblies and maybe the National Assembly because it's touchy on them? Is there another avenue we can have to change the Constitution? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kasim. We can have one more before, Madam President, considering that those are 4 questions, 5 questions, if you're available, you can respond to some. Then I can have Abner.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, there's a number of questions I've noted down. There was a question on, I think, one of the previous speakers in terms of the role of the opposition, where he complained of perhaps, quote unquote, the opposition being compromised. Now, perhaps if I could take him back to when the president was signing the IEBC bill into law. Remember, there was a bipartisan team in parliament that worked on what they termed the NADCO report that was approved by Parliament and submitted to the President for recommendation. And there are a number of recommendations that the NADCO had recommended to the President for implementation. It is a very bulky report. Perhaps if you could take some time and go through it. But that's a more political than legal question, but maybe just to delve into it slightly. I think in terms of Kenyans as the role, I think we do not need to have an active opposition in terms of trying to push for agenda, and that's why I think we've in the recent past seen Kenyans go to the street to advocate for their rights and all that. When I was a bit younger, I remember what we previously had was a very active opposition that was in law, where we could find that once you'd lose an election, you'd form the opposition, and you could see something like a shadow cabinet. I remember the former president Uhuru Kenyatta. At that time, they could even have a shadow cabinet just to have checks and balances in government. So that forms part of the NADCO report, where they have recommended that the official opposition be provided for in terms of the law. Whether it would be effective or not, that is a question for another day. The other question was on the issue of Chapter 6, which, Manwa, you delved into it in terms of the balance between presumption of innocence and Chapter 6. And I think for me, I'm of the school of thought that while the presumption of innocence is paramount and everyone is entitled to that until a case is determined, but when it comes to Chapter 6, I think when it comes to holding of public offices, I think once a public officer or a state officer then has a charge in court, then for the purpose of the sanctity of Chapter 6, that is good governance and all that, I think one should step aside until the case is cleared. We are not saying that you're guilty. We are not saying that the charges are confirmed, but until the case is heard and determined, and you have defended yourself successfully, then you should step aside and let others perhaps govern. But that also has been having a challenge, because we have also seen in previous regimes where people who are not quote unquote politically correct then having had trumped up charges before them, because perhaps they've taken a position that is contrary to what the government feels. So it's more of it's a discussion or a debate that we can continue having. Ochel Dudley talked of something to do with the police stations. It is indeed very sad state of affairs. I recently saw, I can't remember the name of a young man who was held at Mudaiga police station for 30 days, up to 30 days. I mean, to me, that for lack of a better word, is torture. And remember, one of the non-derogable rights that includes right to life is also right from not being subjected to torture. So, I mean, that amounts to torture. And for me, I think independent offices such as the IPOA has failed the state and the citizens in terms of their oversight mandate. And they have turned out to be this dog that barks but cannot bite. I recently had a conversation with a friend, and he had a suggestion such as, having CCTV cameras in our police stations. I mean, what is it that happens behind those closed grills and cells? What is it that happens so that a police station can hold a citizen up to 30 days? I mean, that is inhumane. So those are such kind of conversation that we should be having, because Mano, you can attest, sometimes you are sure that a citizen has been arrested, is at a particular police station, but the police officer or the OCS denies that this person is not in this particular police station. So perhaps for accountability purposes, we can front for such kind of reforms, so that we have, I mean, a police cell is just a holding area. There's no secret there. So that for purposes of openness and integrity, then we can we can call or demand for, footage and see whether this person is being detained in that station or not. Maybe perhaps to the last speaker, I only managed to get the last part in terms of what happens if we are trying to amend the constitution, and at some point perhaps the political class then in their way manipulate and reject. I think we are a step in the right direction, where citizens have invoked their rights under Article 1 and are now forcing the political class to have some of these very uncomfortable conversations, to deal with accountability, corruption, pilferage of public funds, and citizens calling for, good governance. Yeah. So I just remind him that the absolute power belongs to the people. If you could remember, if you're a bit, your memory could serve you right, if you could remember, we had push for example, how we had the push for the new constitution through you could remember the Bomas draft, the orange and the banana and that kind. That was a direct push by the citizens. So I'm a firm believer that the absolute power belongs to the people. And if there are particular sections of this constitution that we would want amended, then we are still able to push and have the same hard and amended. Because man was not made for the law. Thank you.
Manuel, just to add on to that, I think I'll just answer 2 questions on what Abner has mentioned on Article 152, that provides for the constitution of cabinet. Someone asked about, a cabinet secretary being a member of parliament. Well, the system of governance that we are currently, the constitutional dispensation that we have right now is a presidential kind of system of governance. So the reason why a cabinet secretary cannot be a member of parliament is just for more or less the same reason. So when you are a cabinet secretary nominee, you aren't supposed to be a serving member of National Assembly or the Senate. And if you are, then I think resignation, has to suffice for one to effectively take up the role as a cabinet secretary. And then the other question was about the impartiality of the speaker. Well, again, it's a legal and political angle to it. Yes, I may agree on some of the decisions that have been taken by the speaker, especially the speaker of the National Assembly. And I think one of the issues I had was on when the determination of the question of the majority party in the National Assembly. I feel it wasn't handled well on the legal context of it, but more of a political context to it. Then the other issue, the other day, I think I saw the Citizen TV reported, that is South Olali, saying they have been banned from accessing parliament because of their quote unquote role in mainstreaming the protest and what was happening. I think that decision is constitutionally illegal, because when you look at Article 118 of our Constitution of Kenya 2010, it talks about the public access and participation, and it provides that Parliament, the Senate or the National Assembly, or even both, shall conduct their business in an open manner, and its sittings and those of its committees shall be in public. And further, read conjunctively, says that Parliament shall facilitate public participation and involvement in the legislative and other business of Parliament and its committees. And then clause sub-article 2, which is where the strength of my argument lies, talks about Parliament may not exclude the public or any media, from any settings unless in exceptional circumstances the relevant speaker, could be the Speaker of the Senate of the National Assembly, has determined that there are actually justifiable reasons for the exclusion. So the justifiable reason here that purportedly the Speaker of the National Assembly or even the Senate, by extension, may have picked, doesn't really, fit within the ambit and the context of justifiable reason. So I think that was a political decision that should be challenged because it violates not just, the rights of the media as constitutionally enshrined, but it equally violates the right of the members of public to access, information through mainstreaming of, media when they project the proceedings happening in Parliament, either Senate or the National Assembly. Yeah, so back to you, Manuel. Thanks.
Thank you, PLO. We'll have Redemptor kindly proceed and raise your concerns. Redemptor, you have the microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello. This is Redemptor.
Yes, we can hear you. Kindly proceed.
There's someone else speaking. So I'll go very fast. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak up. Thank you, Madam Chair and LSK for the work you're doing. Because now it's not a matter of when the young people go to the streets, it's if they go to the streets. Before I ask my questions and make my submission for self-preservation, I'd like to say mimi ni mtetezi, mwandishi na mzazi, and pia mwananchi, so that when people ask why I'm so active on X Spaces, we are living in bad times. Before I forget a question that has just popped up now, Justice Dande in a Malindi court had banned, I think, tear gas and water cannons. And now we've seen the introduction of the orange smoke. And there are theories that it's a dangerous, it's a burnt substance, it has side effects. So I'd like someone to address that. Now on the vetting, I would like to ask a question that somebody had raised, that when the CS security said he does not know about the hooded men and he is now being reappointed, as an individual, you can be a target if you move to the vetting board and make an objection. Is it possible for somebody like LSK to make presentations about what happened under Kindiki's watch? Because if I say it as Redemptor, I could get in trouble. My other take is just the need for champions for justice in this during this period to make their voices heard more than. There's an echo. Somebody's mic is on.
Kindly continue. You can continue, kindly. Redemptor, you can unmute yourself. Redemptor,
Yes,
you
sorry.
can unmute yourself.
Sorry, I've been muted. So the lead.
Redemptor, kindly unmute yourself.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes,
sorry.
proceed.
So I was on the goons. Can goons suspend the constitution? And thankfully, LSK went to court when protests were banned. So I think how to address this matter is when state officers and people who are apologists of the system go to talk shows in the media, they always talk about the right to property being protected. And I think we need to amplify the human rights, that the right to protests, the right not to get killed while doing it. And the other one that I would appeal to anybody who's having this conversation is, I was corrected by a senior counsel when I made a presentation here last and I talked about extrajudicial killings in terms of the protests, and they told me it is summary executions. So I think that needs to be amplified. Now the other one is just two last one, very quick ones. If we fail on the legal end, what can we do on the social end? Is it illegal to post billboards near Parliament or near the police station saying these people are killed exercising their constitutional rights? And the last one is the failure of state to help in the security agents have not, and I'm putting quotes, have not actively participated in retrieving the bodies in Kware. We saw that hulabaloo about serial killer, and I've been following the social justice group in Kware. Even when all these other demonstrations were going on, they were still retrieving bodies. So I think there are bodies that have been retrieved that have not been are documented. And if you remember my last submission is the spiral of silence. So now we have forgotten the quarry story and we are slowly forgetting about the others. So those are my many, many questions, and thank you for the opportunity. I don't know if I missed any when I was muted. So thank you.
We've heard you. Thank you, Redemptor. We can have a few interventions before we invite the president to address some of them because of we are running out of time. Benito, if you can keep it short. Benito, you have the microphone.
Oh man, I've been waiting, Mono, for a while here.
Apologies, there are so many speakers. Benito, are you there? Mwangi, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mano, for the chance. I'll keep it brief, but I want to address, I think, 2 points. And this point was raised by a gentleman called Thomas, and then there is a professor, then Brian International. And I think this is the issue about morality. I think our country is not short of laws. We have enough laws. And I want to make my statement regarding corruption and members of law society being actors in that. And I know you did allude that you talked about people have the right to be represented, but actually on a morality, it's wrong. And actually, Manuel, you addressed that question in a way that was very, on the sidelines. I think if you have, Brian asked, Professor, why is this man not being retrieved? And the reason is because we have good counsels. The higher the corruption, the more the legal fees. That's a fact. Where you cannot refuse to take a client on a legal basis, but on a moral grounds, you can say no. So therefore, I actually say that the legal fraternity, they are complicit in the proceeds of crime. And I think a law society cannot just be complicit in that. I think they should do something about that. That's one of the statements I want to make. The other point on the way forward, I think Dudley asked what is the question of the way forward. I think we all support, where we are in the country, but I think maybe there's a place for the legal society to help, everyone to articulate legally what are the steps, that we want. It's good to go on the streets and picket, but actually if there is no clear articulation of what are the demands, then it becomes just, people just loitering around. We want not just loitering, but actually people presenting demands that can be anchored on the law. So I don't know to what extent the law society can help in that. And last but not least is about the civic education. I think what you're doing here is great. We only have 619 people here. I think the main problem we have back in the country is actually ujinga, it's lack of education. And this is actually why we are here, because we don't educate our people. Back in the village, they are not having this conversation. They don't even know they are right. You can say that the power belongs to the people, but they don't have any power if they don't understand what are their rights. So, and I don't know whether to what extent this conversation can be taken to the barazas, to the village, so that we can equip our people to be able to make the right decisions when it comes to exercising their constitutional rights. So I do applaud actually this assembly and the work that's going on to educate Kenyans on what they are entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can have the last question so that we call it, and we finish up. Jos, if you're there. In the meantime, Abner, if you can be able to respond to those questions even as we do the final remarks.
Yes, thank you. Maybe just a concern from Redemptor, I think, was about the.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to ask 2 questions. Number 1, quickly, is does the law allow the state to charge issuance of identification cards? If no, is there a way we can challenge it? If yes, What happens when an ID expires? Does one lose citizenship? Again, on that, how can we handle situations where the government services are delayed intentionally with the aim of extortion? For example, a passport or a good conduct is delayed with an excuse that the printers are being repaired or faulty. But if you are willing to part ways with a few thousand notes, it can be processed within a few days. Question number 2. This is directly to you, LSK. Has any one of you ever encountered police brutality? How did you deal with it? Can LSK, with their wealth of knowledge of law, task IPOA of accountability? I mean, we all live in Kenya, and we all see how unprofessional our police are. Must one have to file a complaint to IPOA for action to be taken when they are aware of the happenings during demonstrations? Thank you so much, and that's all I have.
Thank you. I think Anonymous, if you can, Anonymous, if you can have your last question so that we close it there and have the responses even as we close this session. Okay. Abner.
Yes.
Kindly you can take it.
Yes. Thank you very much. I was responding to Redemptor's question, where she had picked up from where we had already discussed in terms of the judgment that was delivered in Malindi by Justice Thande in terms of the police being barred from using, the canisters and all those kind of live bullets in terms of containing the peaceful demonstrators. But we have time and again now see them come up with new kind of styles and ways to try and make it not very clear as to whether they were bad for example, using that orange book, which I was informed that does have some effect in terms of itchiness, and you can never know what are the far-reaching consequences. And I think that really goes back to what we were discussing in terms of the leadership of the police service and putting them into account. And I think moving forward, we have already instituted proceedings in court in terms of trying to make the IG accountable for the brutality that we have witnessed, and also, of course, for the deaths that we have unfortunately lost innocent Kenyans. Maybe to the question of these corrupt individuals having advocates, and I mean a battery of lawyers to that effect, and in terms of as a society, what are we doing about it? Are we beneficiaries of such? Perhaps I could just simply say that every citizen has a right to counsel, and that is a constitutional right. And perhaps maybe if we would want to have that discussion or change it to that effect, whether that should be a constitutional right or not, then that is a discussion for another day. But remember, the law is like a sword, in a kata mbele na nyuma. So perhaps tomorrow you may be in a position where you'd want counsel, and then the question would be, do you have a right to that counsel? Because every person also have their story to the case. In terms of the identification cards and passport delays, I think Manwa, you're in a better position to answer that, because I know that there's an ongoing suit regarding that, and in terms of expiry dates. For me, I think I have personally raised my concern with IPOA. For me, I think it's a dog that cannot bite. They have really disregarded their responsibilities, and they are not doing enough. I mean, we have for the last 1 month called upon them to identify these officers that we have already circulated. They have clear photographs. We know their identity. We even have their contacts, and we cannot have endless investigations. I think as a society, perhaps if we can remember when we lost one of our members due to police overact, that is the late Willie Kimani. IPOA really came in hand and were able to quickly investigate and have these particular officers presented before court, and now justice was duly served where they are serving their terms in prison. But presently, with the new body, the new officers who are now in charge of IPOA, we are really seeing a lot of lethargy and reluctancy in terms of how they are moving, and perhaps as citizens we can put or pile more pressure for them to act. Otherwise, if they cannot act, then why should we have them? So I think for me, my closing remarks would be maybe to just first thank all of you for joining this session and raising your concerns. We also on our end, you have tasked us with some of the things which I think we'll also pick up. Maybe also moving forward, I know this is not the end to the push for accountability reforms and better governance. Just to urge all of us to, whenever maybe we are called upon to have the peaceful demonstrations, just make sure that we act in accordance with the law, that is trying to be peaceful and not cause damage to property and loot and all that, so that it cannot be an excuse or a way to try and end the call for accountability. As a society, we have been relentless, and we shall continue to assist where we can, and support and offer legal services when required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council, for those contributions and your wind-up statements. I think we have basically answered the majority of the questions that were raised since morning when we started this process. The question on ID cards and the expiry question is a question that is a subject of court proceedings instituted by the Law Society. We are of the opinion as a society that citizenship can never expire. We are Kenyans. If you're born here and you got an ID card, the government cannot purport to have that identity expire. And of course, we will be waiting for the court to make a determination on that question. It's a matter that we are following closely. And once the court determines that question, of course, the members of the public will be cautioned from that extra expense of or requiring members of the public to renew their ID cards after every 10 years. On the question of police brutality, and I think as Dudley indicated, we, as the Law Society of Kenya, will take the necessary steps to ensure that indeed the officers who perpetuate these brutalities are actually brought to book. We are in the process, and as we indicated earlier, we have deliberately instituted cases in court as the Law Society against the individuals and office holders of those of police stations and institutions that actually perpetuate these injustices. I would wish that we end it there, and I wish to thank you on behalf of the President of the Law Society of Kenya for participating in this citizen assembly. We intend to have another one on Monday. We call upon you to continue submitting your requests, your information to the toll number that we supplied on our pages, the Law Society of Kenya page. If you feel you have information that can assist us protect people's rights in form of people being held or incarcerated beyond the 24 hours, people who have been abducted, we'll continue to do the habeas corpus applications and request that these institutions take personal responsibility for those violations. I would wish that we leave it at that, and thank you so much. We hope to have these discussions as we go forward. I wish to appreciate the advocates who have been in the forum and answering the questions and interventions that have been raised by the members of the public and the different experts who have participated in this process. Thank you and enjoy your afternoon.